This conference will now be recorded.
Because whatever the truth of what happened yesterday is, it is in the best interest of everybody in control to either cover it up or to deceive or to give a false message or to not tell the whole story. Those in power have one thing in mind: to preserve their power, whatever it takes. So just be careful right now of believing everything you hear. Try to have a spiritual mind. Ask for wisdom, for clear thinking. And anytime there's a crisis, it's an opportunity to witness of the Lord. So you go to your job this week or whoever you're around this week, and they express concern. And Steve's kind of shared this lately about how he viewed his job the last few years. You will deal with people out there, family, friends, or just general people you come across this week, who will ask your opinion about what happened yesterday. And instead of strictly getting into a political discussion, try to think about, what can I say to plant a seed in their mind about the Lord? Well, I don't know all the facts yet. I may never know all the facts, but I do know that the Lord's in control and that the future is in His hands, and I put my trust in Him. Just something simple like that. It kind of turns the discussion in a way that helps that person more than just jumping on board with them of, sharing your political views or whatever. Use it as an opportunity to point them to the Lord. The last few Sundays, we've been looking at the Psalms. It seems like whether it be up on our screen when we come in, or verses that are read before the last song, or whatever, it seems like a lot of our focus lately has been on the Psalms. And I take it to be the Lord's direction. Part of it is because Gary J is teaching about the life of David. And so if you're going through the life of David, you're going to be thinking about the book of Psalms quite a bit. But as I said last week, the older I get, the more my attention is on the Psalms, because the Psalms are a book that helps you to reflect, helps you to meditate, helps you to think about the things of God and the things of your life. I encourage you every day to read from the Psalms. I'm trying to read through the Psalms as part of my daily reading. I try to read a psalm every morning. So I'm just about, I have just a couple more Psalms left because if you do that, then you read through the Psalms about twice in the year. And so I'm already looking forward to going back to Psalm 1 and starting all over again. Because as many times as I've done this, certain Psalms get stuck in your thinking, and you look forward to when you get to, they're like old friends. Psalm 46, I can't wait. Psalm 46, I love Psalm 46, or whatever, whichever one it is. Today I want to deal with what is a favorite of many people, even if it's not a favorite entire psalm, which it is for many people. A number of the individual verses are favorites because they really speak about deep things and good things and uplifting things. And I'm referring to Psalm 139. And as I read through this, it's just going to trigger your memory of having read through it yourself or hearing devotionals and sermons from it. Psalm 139 is one of those psalms that helps us to look up, which helps us down here. What helps us down here? To look up. And Psalm 139 does that. My Bible says as a title, God's perfect knowledge of man. For the chief musician, a psalm of David. And this is David at his best, this psalm is. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. One of the blessings of this, before I read on, is even if you are like Jonah, running from the Lord, this is true. Jonah could not get away from the presence of God. And because of that, God restored him eventually. So even in our rebellion, this is true. Much more when we are in fellowship with him, we appreciate it. Verse 11, if I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts, you covered me. Some of you have a footnote that says that word covered means woven. And I like that word, woven. You wove me. I was a woven person in my mother's womb. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. Of course, we're told until you are fully formed, you're not a person. That's what we're being told today. This verse says, you saw me as a person when I was yet unformed. And in your book, they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. Count your blessings. When I awake, I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men. For they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God. Here's where we get the song. And know my heart, and try me, and know my anxieties. See if there's any wicked way in me, Lead me in the way everlasting. Isn't that a great song? I feel like reading it all over again. So the sermon is simple today. In my mind, I broke this psalm down into just 5 main thoughts. And I hope each one of these will be a blessing to you. The first thought is the first 12 verses. And I gave the thought to these verses, He knows all about me, yet He still loves me. We sang that song, He loves even me, even me. Sometimes in our pride, we get a little lifted up and we think, oh, I'm pretty lovable. But then there's other times when you realize, sometimes I'm not so lovable. And we have this kind of effect on each other where some days we like each other more than other days, if we're being honest. But God loves us at all times. And He knows the deepest, even darkest thoughts that we have. And sometimes when those thoughts are dark, some of you do as my dear wife does. She quotes and reads Philippians chapter 4. Think on these things, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report. Think on these things. She says sometimes the most important time to think about Philippians 4 is in the middle of the night. Aren't your thoughts either the best or the worst? They're always extreme, aren't they? One way or the other in the middle of the night. Your fears are the greatest. Your worries are the deepest. Your anxiety is the most in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'm able to tell myself, I don't want to think about anything. I just want to go back to sleep. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We love that song we sing every once in a while from the Heavenly Highway book, He Knows. He knows. There's not a thing about me He doesn't know. The things I won't even admit to myself, He knows. And yet He still loves me. He knew that about me when He sent His Son to die for me. Jesus knew that about me when He said, I'll go die for them. Jesus is the ultimate example of love your enemies, because we were all His enemy when He died on the cross. And He died in our place so that He could provide a way to defeat His enemies in the way He wants to defeat His enemies, by turning them into friends. Now, when He comes back, He will defeat the enemies that reject Him and rebel and refuse. But that's their choice. He would prefer that He defeat His enemies through His blood by them turning to Him in faith and repentance, turning an enemy into a friend. That's how He would like to defeat His enemies. That's why He died on the cross, to defeat His enemies in the way that He wants to defeat them, through their salvation, through their forgiveness, through their humility. But those who refuse that, He will defeat them at His return and in His judgment. He knows all about me, and yet He still loves me. That's the first 12 verses. And then verses 13 through 16 that we read, I call these, He cares for me. He knows all about me, yet He still loves me. These verses talk about He cares for me even before I was born. You know, a mother often thinks this when she's carrying her baby. And she tells that baby later, I loved you before you were born. And I think that's the way it should be. That's why mothers sing to their babies in their womb, you know. But God loved you before your mother even knew she was expecting you. That's how much He loves you and cares for you. Let's read those again. Verse 13, you formed my inward parts and wove me. I am a woven person. The greatest medical minds, the greatest biological minds, the greatest minds of any field that deals with the way our body works. To the greatest of them, the way our body works is still a mystery. How many of you have gone to your doctor with some condition, and after a number of tests, the doctor says, I still am not sure what the problem is? Thanks. We are so intricate, we are so interwoven in just the way we are fashioned by God. The way the muscles and the skeletal part of our bodies and the arteries and the blood vessels and the way they all send signals to each other. I wish mine would send signals to my back and hip to quit hurting all the time, but as you get older, the signals get older too. They slow down. But just the way our bodies operate is such a deep mystery, beyond the capability of the human mind to understand. And yet, where did we come from? We came from the dust of the earth. We came from mud. We came from red dirt. So basically, God was saying, I'm going to take this pile of red dirt and I am going to form something so complex that the human race will never be able to understand the details of the human body completely. And I think one reason why He made us from red dirt is to keep us humble. I came from dirt. I'm going to return to dirt. I am dirt. That's why Jesus died for me. And when David was thinking about this, he broke out in a praise in verse 14. You know, I'd like to think, you try to picture the setting of when David wrote this or when David recited this back to himself in the form of a song. Probably had a musical instrument in the cool of the evening. The kingdom was at peace. He was reflecting on the blessings of God. And as he wrote this or as he recited this back to himself and was singing this to music, at this point, he broke out in praise. For I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you. Some of you have a footnote that says this frame is the idea of the skeleton, the bones. the structure that our flesh hangs upon, that our vital organs are put into place around. When I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Skillful, wise master builder. Your eyes saw my substance, being yet unformed. And in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there was none of them. He had a desire, you might say a plan, however detailed you think that is, but in general, he had a plan for every person. He had a desire for every person before they were ever born. Most people will not fulfill that desire that God has, that Paul expressed in 1 Timothy 2. God desires that all be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Most will reject that, but that doesn't mean he didn't have that plan, didn't have that desire, didn't have that built in to our very being. Even when Adam and Eve sinned, we like to talk about God clothed them with the animal skin, showing that it had to be the blood of an innocent animal and that God had to be the one to clothe them. God had to be the one to cover their sin. But have you ever thought about the very act of God doing that was his way of showing how much he loved them even immediately after their rebellion? They completely disobeyed him and rejected him as their ruler and put themselves as their own ruler and heeded the voice of the enemy, which you would think would God make God very angry. And yet when he clothed them with that animal skin, that was God's way of saying, in spite of what you just did, I still love you. Very merciful act of God on their behalf at a time when they deserved the opposite. So he knows all about me, yet he still loves me. He cares for me even before I was born. And then verse 17 and 18, I call this, he consumes me. At least that's what he wants. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. And when I awake, I am still with you. David, whatever the setting, in my mind, I have that him sitting alone with his musical instrument in the cool of the evening, just him and God, and he's meditating on God's goodness. And when he writes and recites verse 17 and 18, he's totally consumed with God. He is experiencing the way God wants us to experience the first great commandment. He was living it. He was thinking it. He was feeling it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That's how I see David in every part of his being, consumed with God, experiencing the first great commandment in verse 17 and 18. In the verses 19 through 22, I call, he shares my same enemies, and he will make all things right. If you're a child of God trying to serve him as he would have you to be, and you're experiencing the first great commandment, and you're trying to walk with him in humble faith, and you're doing all the things that Gary J said you're supposed to do as a Christian. You're going to share the same enemies that God has. And that's why that great Psalm 73, for great sermons throughout our life, why do the wicked prosper? Why does everything seem to go right in their life? As for me, my feet had well nigh slipped when I looked at the wicked and how they prospered and things going well. They're rejecting the Lord and they're going their own way and they're treating other people poorly, and I'm trying to do everything right, and yet my life is a struggle and their life seems to be smooth. So we read down through that and we think, well, I've thought those same things. Those are my enemies. Until he gets down, what is it, verse 17? Until I went into the sanctuary of the Lord. Then I understood their end. They're the ones whose feet are on slippery places. God's going to take care of all that. It just may not be in my lifetime. It may not be when and how I would like. But God will take care of all of his enemies and your enemies. He's going to slay them in verse 19 because they're bloodthirsty. Whatever motivated this young man to climb up on that roof and take those shots yesterday, he certainly was bloodthirsty. We hear people speaking against the Lord wickedly in verse 20. We certainly hear multiple times every day, if we're out in public, your enemies take your name in vain. I mean, that's when this is really common, isn't it? They treat the Lord's name like a swear word. And doesn't it cause us to say inside of ourselves what David said? Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. And they are. But we're to still love them. We're still to share Christ with them. We're to try to be an example of a Christian before them, even though inside we feel this way. Then it closes out in verse 23 and 24. I call this, he comforts me and gives me assurance. So he knows, he cares, he consumes me, he shares my enemies, and he comforts me. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and try me and know my anxieties. See if there's any wicked way in me. Of course, if the Lord reveals that, we're to seek his forgiveness and restoration. Lead me in the way everlasting. It's kind of David's way of what Jesus said. The gate in the way that leads to life. This is just David's way of saying the same thing. Lead me in the way everlasting. God sent his son Jesus to die on the cross so that we could have an everlasting way to seek, to find, to experience. And if you do not know the way everlasting, you can only find it through him. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He offers everlasting life to those who will come to him. I pray that if you are here and realize you need that life of Christ in your heart, you will come during the invitation song, maybe even kneel at this altar, ask Christ into your heart. Or you can do it where you are. The main thing is just do it. The main thing is just call on him. Ask him for life eternal. And he will give it freely. And he will turn you from an enemy to a friend in a way that will benefit you for eternity. That's the way the Lord wants to do it. We're going to have a verse of invitation song. We would all stand as we sing a verse of this. I invite you to come to the one who knows all about you and loves you anyway. And he showed it by the death on the cross. And he wants to give you his life today. What page?
657.
Thank you. So continue to pray for Gary and Dina as they recover from COVID. And hope none of the rest of us have a second or third round or wherever you are with that. Keep the First Missionary Baptist Church of Bakersfield in your prayers. They've been out of a pastor for 2 years now. And there are other churches that are